You know, it happens more often than you might think. I've had a few friends that this has happened to, and if you notice here, there's a breakaway valve on the filling hose that they used to not have about 10-15 years ago. Next time you go to the gas station and you pump, take a look for that. It was born out of necessity because of people like my friends who drove away with the nozzle still in their gas tank hole. Anyway, step away from the phone. Let's talk about the cell cycle. The cell cycle is a way that scientists have kind of grouped all these items together, which come together in order to allow a cell to divide. And I know I'm being vague. We talked about it last section. Mitosis, cytokinesis are two of those portions of the cell cycle. But you have to imagine, in order for the cell to divide, a lot of other stuff has to take place as well. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail now. Here's a picture in your book, and it's this circular picture. It looks like a pie that's been divided up. There's a lot of information here, and you can see here these what would you call that, brown balls. What this is suggestive of is the nucleus and the DNA in the nucleus, which is going to divide, and it's characterized in the pie here as yellow. This is but a small portion of the overall cell cycle, and it's the actively dividing portion of DNA or chromosomes, and we'll call that mitosis. We've kind of touched on mitosis already. It's called the M phase. Cytokinesis is part of this, and remember, cytokinesis is the division of the cytoplasm. It's the division of everything in addition to the nucleus, which has the chromosomes in it. But the whole other portion of this is called interphase. This is what's going on in preparation for division, but it's not the active division of the cytoplasm or the nucleus, such as mitosis. It's the preparation, it's the cell growth, it's the copying of chromosomes and things of that nature. You'll see that right here. Here's a little bit more detail. You can see here's mitosis and cytokinesis. We'll call that the mitotic or M phase. There's three other phases as well, and each of these are incorporated in interphase. There's the G1, S, and G2 phases. Well, if you were to divide, well, let me back up. So, on average, in an adult human's body, when a cell gets a message to divide, let's say a skin cell gets a message, it's a hormonal message coming through the bloodstream, it hits the cell, and it hits the nucleus of the cell, and it gives this message. It says, okay, you've been a skin cell now for 2 or 3 weeks, you've done your job, you've protected the exterior of this individual, now divide. So usually then it takes about 24 hours for the cell to divide on average. You'll read that in your book. And interphase is 90% of that time. So the very first thing that's going to happen is the G1 phase. It takes on average about 5 to 6 hours of that 24 hours. And what G means is growth. Things need to grow or duplicate. Cytoplasm needs to duplicate. Mitochondria need to duplicate. All sorts of proteins, enzymes, everything that's within the cell that helps the cell do its job has to duplicate or grow. Remember, the daughter cells, both of them that are made from the parent cell, have to be identical. They're not only identical to one another, but they're also identical to the parent cell itself. So everything that's in that parent cell has got to be replicated. The S phase would incorporate about 10 to 12 hours, almost 50% of the total time of this that the cell is using in cell division, and that's for DNA replication. We'll get into that, I think, in like chapter 16 or 17. How exactly does the DNA replicate or copy itself? But just for now, know that that's what happens in the S phase. And then in the G2 phase, the final division, or sorry, the final growth occurs of all those organelles and cytoplasmic elements, and that happens, if you notice, after the S phase. That would incorporate maybe 4 to 6 hours of that total time. And then finally, mitosis, this M phase way down here, would only incorporate about 1 out of 24 hours, or less than 10% of that time is actually spent in the division of this nucleus and the division of the cytoplasm for cytokinesis in order to make two cells from one. Well, here's a little bit of information. I don't know what gap means off the top of my head, but here they are, the G1S and G2 phases. It says here that the cell grows during all three phases, and this is true, especially in eukaryotic cells that don't have a cell wall. We're saying non-plant cells, like maybe cells in a human's body. The cell will actually get bigger. You can see it under a microscope over time actually get huge. It gets really big because, if you can imagine, everything has to be duplicated in order for the cell to divide.
Most eukaryotic cells follow a process of growth and division called the cell cycle. These events include a growth stage, mitosis or nuclear division, and cytokinesis or division of the cytoplasm. Throughout interphase, the cell is engaged in growth and metabolic activities. Interphase can be further broken down into three discrete phases called G1, S, and G2. During the G1, or first growth phase, normal cell functions occur as well as cell growth. In the S phase, DNA replicates, producing 2 copies of each chromosome. During the G2 phase, the cell continues to prepare for mitosis and cell division. Mitosis, or the M phase, has 4 stages: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. During prophase, the chromosomes become visible and condense, becoming shorter and thicker. Each identical copy of a single chromosome is called a sister chromatid. The nuclear envelope breaks down and spindle fibers form as microtubules grow out of the centrioles that move to opposite poles of the cell. During metaphase, the double-stranded chromosomes line up along the equator of the cell. The spindle is now fully formed and the microtubules attach to each sister chromatid. Anaphase begins when the sister chromatids of each chromosome begin to separate. The centromere that holds sister chromatids together divides, and the chromosomes move away from each other along its spindle fiber. In telophase, the 2 groups of chromosomes reach the opposite ends of the cell. As a new nuclear envelope starts to form around each group, the chromosomes uncoil and the spindle disappears. The division of the cytoplasm and organelles is called cytokinesis, or the C phase. The result of mitosis and cytokinesis is the formation of 2 genetically identical cells. To summarize the entire cycle, G1, S, and G2 phases occur during interphase while the cell is growing and preparing to divide. Mitosis, or the division of the nucleus, consists of 4 phases: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, and in these phases duplicate copies of the chromosomes are split equally. Finally, the cell's cytoplasm divides during cytokinesis and results in the formation of 2 genetically identical daughter cells.
Thanks for your attention. Here's an objective that I'd like you to answer now. We'll talk about tomorrow. I want to make clear something. In that video, you saw a lot of detail on the actual stages of mitosis. We're not there yet. We're gonna get there in the next podcast for 12.2. Just understand that it goes on. We'll get to those details. Also, I want you to understand that cells don't divide and create new cells just for the heck of it, so that they can do it and then create more cells. Maybe when the baby is super small after the sperm goes into the egg and it just needs to create a bunch of cells. But as an adult, your cells all have a function. If it's a pancreatic cell or an eye tissue cell or a skin cell, it has a job to do. And so don't think that cells, are always dividing to create new cells and then that happens again and again and again. In fact, cells are dividing to create a cell that then does a job for maybe a day or maybe a week or maybe even longer, maybe a few weeks. Then the cell gets a message to divide again if it's not damaged. In fact, if cells divide and divide and divide, and we call that uncontrollable division, that actually is cancer.